and welcome to Counselling Psychotherapy Tutor. This is a series of videos that I've made for my students for revision that I hope will be helpful to everyone. Today we're going to be looking at Petruska Clarkson's 5 relational framework for integration in therapy, and we're focusing today on the reparative or developmentally needed relationship. If you find this helpful or useful, please subscribe to my channel, like, follow, share, and feel free to make comments in the box below. So today we're looking at the reparative or developmentally needed relationship. And this is one of 5 relationships that Petruska Clarkson describes in her relational integrative approach to counselling and psychotherapy. The 5 relationships in their totality are the working alliance, the transferential relationship, the reparative or developmentally needed relationship, person-to-person relationship, and the transpersonal relationship. And she believed that all 5 were available and could be utilised within the therapeutic relationship with clients. So the reparative and developmentally needed relationship. And really what this is the intentional provision by the therapist to provide a corrective or reparative, perhaps replenishing parental relationship or action where the original parenting was either deficient, abusive, or overprotective. Okay, so you're wanting to provide what has not been met historically for the clients in terms of their fundamental relationship need. So when we're thinking about the developmentally needed or reparative relationship, we're really referring to those aspects of relationship which have either been absent for clients, they haven't received them at all, or have been kind of traumatic for the client at particular periods of their childhood. And these are then kind of supplied or provided in some way, shape or form by the therapist within the therapeutic encounter with clients. Ferenczi 1980 said that this is usually in a kind of contracted form or on request by the client or with agreement with the client. This is not something you do to a client. This is a part of a therapeutic collaborative process that a client consents to and agrees to be in relationship with the therapist. So essentially what you're doing is through the therapeutic encounter, through getting to know your client, through developing that working alliance, through understanding your client's lived experience, you're really, as a therapist, trying to identify what are the unmet needs of the client, what have they been historically, where have been the times in the life where the client has needed something desperately and has not received it, and that's had an impact on their experiencing in the here and now. So you're wanting to provide a replenishing or nourishing experience for the client that meets the unmet needs that you have identified that particular client has. So if we think, I'll give you some quotes now that might be useful for your essays. Alice Miller, 1983 and 1985, I think, describes this advocacy type relationship. And that can really be seen as the provision of the developmentally needed force in a child's life, which should have been provided either by a parent or other significant caretakers, but which ultimately, because it's been missing, because it has not been provided historically, the therapist ultimately has to find ways of providing that for the clients. So it's about providing what's missing developmentally, providing what's missing historically in the client's life. And Winnicott, 1958, describes it almost as the kind of holding environment. So kind of being that kind of secure other, being that container, being that holder of, carer of the client and meeting their emotional, physical needs in the space therapeutically. Really important for clients to feel the sense of a secure base, that sense of care, that you are there nourishing them, that you are there replenishing them, that you are there holding them and providing this environment that perhaps historically has been missing. And Schiff 1975 calls it the reparenting technique. So perhaps there's an element to some extent of you kind of reparenting the client, providing that good enough mother or good enough other for the client within the therapeutic relationship. So in the developmentally needed or reparative relationship, it's really this kind of metaphoric kinship relationship being established, and it's really clearly closer to a parent-child relationship than any other forms of bonding. It's the active provision of this parenting, this reparenting for clients' unmet emotional needs. And Ferenczi, 1980, who I think was one of Freud's early followers, really departed from the neutrality and the impassivity of kind of therapeutic encounter, this blank screen therapist. So he kind of really moved away from that and was much more in favour of giving nursery type care to patients. So actively providing that parental, supportive, containing care for clients, perhaps giving friendly hugs or management of regression to very sick patients. And including there was one that he saw, and he would see them at any time of day or night, took this client on holidays with him. So you can see there this really active provision of what was missing for that client being provided by the therapist. I'm not recommending anyone actually goes out and does that, but the fundamental principle that you would identify or get to know what was missing for the client historically, and then in some way demonstrate something of what they may have needed within the therapeutic space, within that therapeutic encounter with a client, kind of this kind of reparenting process, or really working hard at intentionally providing what has historically been missing in the client's experience. So Ferenczi, who took his client on holiday and everything, held that there really needed to be contrast between the original trauma or the original deficiency or missing parts perhaps that can occur in infancy for clients and the therapeutic situation, so that remembering can be kind of facilitative instead of a kind of renewed trauma for the client. The last thing you want to do, if your client has had perhaps deficient or neglectful in some way parenting, is to then become that parent in the room. You're almost going to want to, if you've got a client who's experienced neglect, the intentional provision of a reparative relationship would be to ensure that your work with that client was not remotely neglectful, that you could hold that client in the center of the work, that you could really value that client, provide them with unconditional positive regard, provide them with all of the core conditions, and provide something that could be replenishing to the original experience of neglect. So it's about identifying what has been missing for the client historically, and how can you as the therapist actively work at replenishing or correcting the unmet needs of that client. How can you meet the client's needs in the space? So if we take that example of neglect, you might have to work really hard to make sure you don't forget an appointment with a client. You want to make sure that if that client emails you to reschedule or something like that, that you're responding quickly. So not all of these reparenting techniques or interventions are going to happen in session. It may be about also how are you holding and containing and providing that externally outside of session too, so that the client is not re-neglected by the therapist. And perhaps for that neglectful client, it's about starting sessions on time, finishing sessions on time, making sure that you are there and you're attending to that client throughout the duration of the session, that you're actively meeting that need to repair. The clients need to kind of repair that neglect so that you become the good enough other in the relationship. So that's just a short video on the reparative or developmentally needed relationship. You can draw on various kind of theoretical concepts, right, throughout the relationship to get a sense of the client's unmet needs. You might want to look at things like attachment theory, okay? But the client's unmet needs will become clear as you get to know your client, as you're taking case history, as you're kind of working in relationship with your client, okay, and they're sharing their experiences and their story, you'll get a felt sense of perhaps what they needed and didn't get early on. And you'll also be able to take that to supervision and come up with ways in which actually I can tend to this client, I can replenish, and I can meet some of those unmet needs. If you've enjoyed this video, please watch the next one. I think we've got videos now on all of Clarkson's 5 relationships, so do take a look at them. Please like, follow and subscribe to the channel because there are plenty more videos to come. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Take care. See you next time.